Hey everybody, Professor Dust here. I'm back and answering a few more questions that are starting to surface a lot about return to work. And the last video I posted just offered some recommendations, things for consideration. And now, inevitably, we're seeing even more change, specifically the Delta variant, and that being the newest, most recent point of consideration that might change the way that we were planning on returning to work. So just a few points of consideration to follow up on that. So the overarching question, more or less, has been something along the lines of, should organizations push back their return to work date? And not all, but many organizations, for whatever reason, had Labor Day as on the calendar as being what the date that they wanted to start initiating whatever it was that they were going to land on in terms of their work location arrangements, whether it was, it's fully virtual and the office is available if you want to use it, or something hybrid where people were mandated with certain days or voluntarily coming in a certain number of days versus you are in or required to come in full-time face-to-face 5 days a week. So for whatever reason, that was a popular timestamp that people were considering. Some have already started rolling out some kind of phased plan, and so the big key question is, do we just push pause? Do we push back? What do we do? And it depends, of course, on what you're already doing. If you're already offering some type of flexible arrangement where people have the optionality of working from home, then it's probably okay from an organizational psychology perspective, in that people now know that if they are concerned, then they're more than welcome to continue working from home because it's not mandated that they come in a certain number of days. But if you do have some type of mandates that are specifically saying, hey, you have to come in on these specific days or a certain number of days as soon as this specific target date hits, then I would recommend either rolling that back or pushing back some of those return to work mandate type dates for a few different reasons. Number one, anytime new information comes, employees are going to have questions and they're going to need time to process the information and that new information and make the best decisions for themselves and their families based upon that new finding. And so there hasn't been a ton of clarity yet in the occupational health world in terms of what this means and what the probability changes are, and especially with not exactly knowing when you're going to have vaccines that are going to be available for certain age groups. All of that type of ambiguity for employees is problematic in terms of their well-being, number one, and as well their productivity when they don't necessarily know what to expect and how it's going to influence their surroundings. I think organizations need to remember that employees aren't going to be as productive as they could be if they're worried about working within an environment that they're not comfortable in. So that needs to be included in that new cost-benefit calculation. So a lot of organizations are saying, we've done all this planning and we've worked towards, and invested in coming up with these resources where we want people to be in the office for this specific amount of time and on these days. So we don't want to rescind all of that work and have to start over. But keep in mind that, when it's all said and done, productivity and well-being are go hand in hand from the employee's perspective, and so it could also backfire if you push forward too soon. A few other points of consideration on this. Communicating dates can be tricky. So a lot of organizations have done a few different things, and there's pros and cons to all of them. One of them, for example, is being really clear way ahead of time. This is the date that we're going to do X, Y, or Z, whether it's start a rollout plan or we're going to start everybody going into work. And that can be helpful from the organization, from the employee's perspective, because it gives them a sense of clarity and it allows them to plan. But inevitably, sometimes things change and then you have to readjust, which can be problematic from the employee standpoint. But on the other hand, if you don't communicate anything, if you're not telling employees when you might have some type of decision or what the options you're considering are, or where you're getting information and what key dates you're waiting on that information to hit. If you're not communicating at least that type of information, then your employees will fill that with a vacuum of concern. And that is going to be even more problematic than communicating something that has to be changed. So it is a balancing act where if you communicate with some kind of definition and you know with certainty that might not be accurate, and that can be problematic. But if you don't say anything at all, then it is also creating lots of concern. So communicate something, anything, in terms of what you're doing, how you're doing it, how you're going about making the decisions, when you think information will be available, when you think you'll be able to make some type of determination on these things. So don't let employees go too long without having some type of tangible information, even if it doesn't feel like anything concrete from the organization standpoint. A few other things. This is a nice reminder of the cost-benefit analysis of choosing to do something that is more virtual versus more face-to-face for your return to work. So if it's a continuum where on the one end of the continuum it's completely virtual and people can work wherever they want, and on the other end of the continuum it's 5 days a week face-to-face in the office. The extent to which you are more on the virtual side of that continuum, the easier it's going to be over the next however long we're going to have to deal with this, 2 years, 5 years, whatever it is, in dealing with all of these adaptations and changes and new developments such as the Delta variant and the like. So that should be embedded in that equation, but I don't think it has been at this point. For the most part, people are saying, here's our ideal, what we want to do, because we think this is the best for our business model. Case closed. And that's fine in terms of a long-term perspective, but also in the short term, you have to recognize that if you go too quickly back to that that face-to-face or hybrid that has mandates on certain days of face-to-face, there also is a little bit of additional cost in there because you might have to continually revert back to doing things that you might not be investing in anymore or having the processes for in that more virtual environment. Another important point is that this is a great reminder that it's not going to be a one and done scenario, and that instead organizations should be doing what I would call experiment and iterate. Just as a relatively similar example, when I went in for my physical with my primary care physician, whatever it was, maybe a month or so after I had gotten my COVID-19 vaccinations, I asked him, what do you think is, if this is good, if this is bad, how are we doing? And the response was very clinical in that it was this nice reminder of, oh, we're not done. You know, the next phase is going to be the variants. The next phase is going to be the fact that you're not going to have everybody willing and able to take vaccinations and all the implications there. So, you know, in our mind, we want clarity and we like the idea of, okay, we got to this point and then we don't have to worry about it again. But unfortunately, it's not reality. The reality is that this is going to be an ongoing situation that we have to continually, again, experiment and iterate towards and try and figure out what's the best solution for any one moment in time, given the current return to work situation and whatever's going on with the pandemic. So continuously doing things like surveying, taking a pulse, doing pilot studies, being in tune and paying attention to well-being and productivity, all of the things that we know are very important within organizational behavior scholarship, they're becoming exponentially important within this environment where people's occupational health is of concern, their well-being and their productivity is being impacted as well. So good luck out there and see you next time. Thanks.